Jesse stumbled along, clutching his side. The cold air seared his throat. His thighs burned, yet his fingers were numb from the cold. The hole in his hand throbbed. They'd been marching, climbing, and running up the mountainside for what Jesse guessed was over half an hour. Isabel waited for him at the top of the trail. The rest of the bell snickles were no longer in sight, had darted off as though unbothered by the cold and icy ground. 3 of them not even wearing shoes. Jesse caught up with Isabel and stopped. He leaned heavily against the tree, gasping for air. "Jesse," Isabel said, "we gotta keep moving." Jesse shook his head, spat repeatedly, trying to clear the burn out of his throat. "I can't." "Just a bit further." "Tell you what," he gasped, "leave me here for the wolves. I'd actually prefer to be eaten at this point." She shook her head and managed a half smile. "Don't make me carry you." She grabbed his arm and tugged him along. She might be small, but he could feel her strength. She really could carry him if she had to. A lone caw echoed through the trees. It sounded far away, farther down the hill perhaps. Jesse glanced up, but couldn't see anything through the dense spruce limbs. "I think maybe we've lost them," Isabel said. "You've already told me you were an optimist." "I don't trust optimists." They slid down a slight incline into a ravine. She pointed ahead there. There. Jesse could just make out a cluster of boulders at the base of a cliff. "Just where are you taking me? You should be fine." "Should be? What does that mean?" "Just be careful what you say. Don't upset him." "You mean the Krampus guy?" "It's Krampus." "Just who's this?" Isabel put up a finger. "Enough." She gave him a tug, led him to a recess between the boulders. They stooped down and entered a narrow cave. She guided him toward the faint flicker of light near the rear of the cavern. They stopped before a shaft. Jesse peered down, wrinkled his nose. It smelled like something dead, of decay, of a caged beast living in his own filth. A howl echoed up the shaft. It didn't sound like a man or a beast. Jesse took a step back, shaking his head. "No way." Isabel grabbed his arm. "Jesse, there's no choice here." All the lightness had left her voice. What remained was cold and stern. Her eyes glowed. She looked wicked, like a devil. And Jesse knew how that was leading. And Jesse knew now that she was leading him into a den of devils. Jesse shook his arm loose, gave her a damning look, and stared down. The flickering light below illuminated the shaft just enough that he could pick his way down the stones without falling to his death. A moment later, his foot hit the black, sooty dirt. He turned and froze. There was a cavern, not much larger than a standard living room, the floor littered with liquor bottles, bones, animal hides, and charred wood. Wads of blankets and hay nestled in the back recesses. Piles of newspapers and books were stacked nearly to the ceiling. Candles and oil lamps perched on every ledge and nook. There hung a large yellow map of the earth with what looked to Jesse like astrological symbols, charts, and lines plotted out in charcoal across the continents. Pictures of Santa Claus covered the soot-stained walls, newspaper clippings, magazine ads, children's books, and every single one had Santa's eyes poked out. Jesse searched for the great Krampus, for the monster that held the bell snickles in such dread, and almost overlooking the thing sitting cross-legged on the floor, it sat shivering in the ash and dirt, rocking back and forth, clutching the Santa sack. The stumps of 2 broken horns twisted out of its forehead, and strings of matted hair curled down its gaunt, haggard face. It grinned, then snickered, revealing stained teeth and jagged canines. The creature appeared to be starved, so shriveled and frail, like a corpse, like death itself. Jesse could see every vein and tendon beneath its thin, liver-spotted skin. Something twitched behind it. For a second, Jesse thought it was a snake, a hairy snake, and then realized the thing actually had a tail. It cradled the Santa sack in its bosom like a long-lost child, caressed it with quivering arthritic fingers. It let out a laugh, then sobbed, then laughed some more, tears rolling down from its slanted, filmy eyes. It lolled back its head and cackled wildly, and Jessie noticed the thick manacle clamped around its neck. A chain ran from the manacle to the wall, the smooth metal glistening like no ore Jessie had ever seen. Jessie didn't know whether to be terrified or just feel pity for the wretched creature before him. Isabel dropped down behind Jessie, strolled quickly over the creature. Krampus? The creature looked up. The Belsnickel stood well away, as though afraid to get loose. The Belsnickel stood well away, as though afraid to get too close, glancing nervously at one another and back up the shaft, as though the wolves might come sliding down the shaft at any second. Krampus, Isabel said. Santa Claus and his beasts. They found us. Can't be far behind. Still, the creature ignored her. She laid a hand on his shoulder, gently shook him. Krampus, she said softly. The monsters. They'll be on us soon. The creature didn't respond, only shivered, rocking back and forth with its sack.